Welcome back to my Healing Village podcast, episode 9. Today, I have with me one of my favorite Instagram influencers that I've been following for quite some time. Her name is Rose Vigiano, but on Instagram, you can find her with the tagline, with the handle Awakening Relationships. And she specializes as a relationship coach and attachment specialist as well. And so, Rose, what really initially drew me to you and how I even
Mm.
found you on Instagram, to be honest, is that I started learning about attachment styles. I didn't know, with all of my learning, with all of my coming out of narcissistic abusive relationships, that where was this trend coming from? Why am I constantly being attracted to this type of individual? Why is this
Mm.
individual magnetizing to me? And so, I was really wanting to find an underlying reason, because when you find out why it is, then you can make it stop happening. Ideally, is the goal, right? And I would love to first talk with you about, like, what, breaking into it. We're just going to tear the curtain back here. What are the attachment styles that you coach to as that relationship expert that you are?
Right. Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. So, you know, the attachment theory is based in the idea that we're wired to connect, that we are born on this planet looking for connection. And what happens is that well meaning adults, our caregivers or parents, they have their own stuff that they're dealing with. And so many of them are not able to attune to us in the way that we need. And so we develop these coping mechanisms of what to do with that lack of availability from our caregivers, right? And these end up as adults becoming our attachment styles. So, just to sort of go up on that, if our parents are protective and consistent and available, if they can regulate the home and all of our emotions, if they're, present, if they can repair when we are upset and forgive us easily, then we grow up and we're trusting in relationships and we draw in people that have similar qualities and we are able to manage our emotions well and we can see the good in people and the good in things and we can go for solutions. We don't take things super personally. We're okay whether we're in relationships or without relationships, right?
Yeah.
That said, when we have parents who maybe leave us alone too much, they're not able to be that safe, protective source for us. We feel rejected. Maybe they only love us when we're performing. We develop what's considered to be more of an avoidant attachment style. And that's where we become very self focused. So it's like, I don't need you. So basically, you're a child who had to learn to go at it themselves. And so as an adult, you under prioritize relationships. You sort of avoid them in a way. And even though people with avoidant attachment really want connection, it's very scary for them because as children, connection meant that they were going to be rejected. If they reached out for connection, it wasn't there to reach back.
Mm.
Yeah. So then you have,
And hits
yeah.
deep. That hits really
Okay.
me specifically. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. And let me know if I, more or less on a certain thing. But just to sort of lay them all out, then you have your more anxiously adapters, which are folks who, I always say as a child, they like knew eat it and lost it. So it's like the parents were able to attune to them some of the time, but not enough of the time. So their signal cry for love is always on. So an anxious attacher is always going to need and feel that they need and want more love. Even if they're getting it, they can't really feel it. And so they end up becoming anxious and obsessive and compulsive in relationships. They're not okay if the relationship isn't okay. And sometimes they can even do extreme things to get and keep relationships because that's the only way they can regulate.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. And I think that there's been a lot of, I don't know if it's a misconceived notion or maybe just a misunderstanding, or maybe some sort of a pattern that I'm not seeing. But when we hear a lot lately, depending on what it is you're following on Instagram, about the narcissistic and empath type of magnetic relationship, they want to automatically say that the survivor of that relationship, of the narcissistic relationship, is the anxious attachment, that we just cling
Mhm.
on to that love so much because we just love them. We need it, we need it, we need it. But in my experience, from what I've seen, yes, there are those who cling on to that carrot that's being strung in front of them for that hope because they want to continue to receive or need that love. But on the flip side of it, when we're the ones who walk away, that
Mm,
behavior you're talking about, that obsessive, that compulsive, that almost unhealthy response comes from the narcissist, comes from the abuser. So
mm,
I think it might be fair to say, that it can be different for everyone, but at least from my experience, those who react in a way like that, at least in mine, they're the ones that had the anxious attachment style. And
mm,
I was the avoidant attachment style, kind of that
mhm.
was magnetized towards each other. What are your
Sure, and
thoughts
they
about
pulled
that?
you in. So,
Yeah.
like, because someone that is more anxious will not feel okay until they've gotten you. And
Mm,
especially with somebody who's not available, that's gonna be their biggest goal, right? Because as children, the anxious attacher had some love, but not enough, or some attunement, but not enough. And this isn't always because the parents or the caregivers couldn't. Sometimes there's other reasons like illness or war, things like that, but mostly it has to do with the caregiver's quality of attention. And so they believe that if they can get you to really love them and stay, that will heal that wound from childhood.
mm.
So if the anxious attacher can get the avoidant to stay and really step in, then their younger self feels okay.
Yeah. I mean, do you ever see it with your clients that you work with that they could embody certain attachment styles depending on the situation?
100%. And thank you for saying that. So, first of all, attachment is on a continuum. You will almost never find a person who is, 100% anxious, 100% avoidant, or even disorganized, which is a little bit of both, but mostly shows a lot of fear in relationships. It's disorganized, or even fully secure. You're going to get pockets, right? So you may be 60% anxious in the way you show up in your intimate relationship, but then you have 20% avoidant and 20% secure. Or sometimes it's even more balanced. It's like 30, 30, 10. Haha, I just did it
Right,
like
right.
that. Doing the math quickly. So attachment is really you really have pockets of all the styles. And when you're with somebody who is strong in one category, you will almost always go towards the other. So if you are mainly anxious and have pockets of avoidance, but you get with somebody who's anxious, your avoidance will show up a lot more than with somebody who's avoidant.
That makes a lot of sense. And because I do see that. I do see where
Yeah.
I feel like I'm more avoidant, generally speaking, because of how I was raised and how I'm still trying to cope with how I was raised. But once someone shows that rejection, that's what triggers on my anxious attachment. And then my inner child's like, whoa, 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 hold on, no, no. You can't leave on your terms because that's just what my caregiver did. So if we're gonna leave, I'm gonna leave first, right? Like that. That's like I need to draw you back in almost, and then I'm gonna be the one to leave when I'm ready. You can't do that to me. And it's not that
Right.
you can't do that to me because of you, but it's like my inner child wound can't have you leave me.
Right. Right.
And I think that people want to associate sometimes like, well, they're just avoidant or they're just super anxious and kind of give these stereotypes. And they do fit a mold, like you said, it depends on what strikes it up. But for narcissists specifically, right, for those unhealthy,
Mm,
toxic individuals, the reason, or at least what I think, and I'm asking your,
mm,
um, that how can they come across so secure, right?
mm,
This humble and well informed in the community. Everyone knows who they are. Everyone loves them. Very charismatic. Yet once they're behind closed doors, boom, they're a different person. How does that correlate or parallel with their attachment style? Like, what do you think triggers that?
mhm, mhm. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. And, I would almost more speak to the person who's with them, like the person, like those of us that have been in these situations, right? If you're in a relationship with somebody who's one way in public and then they treat you a totally different way in private and you're showing up for it repeatedly, it's like, what's happening with you? What needs to be healed in you that you are able to take on this kind of treatment and not rejected. It shows an insecure attachment pattern in you because a secure person would not be interested in that.
Right. They're not even gonna.
Yeah, they're just gonna say, "Oh, wow, you're not honest, you're not trustworthy, like, you're scary," like because they don't resonate with it. There's no resonance. You can only stay with a person like that is if you have some resonance from what you experienced growing up.
Got it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say it's more for that person because, everyone is unique. So one person who has actual narcissistic personality disorder or even just has narcissistic tendencies could do it for a number of reasons. They do tend to be extreme on the anxious scale, but it could be somebody who was abused as a child, molested, could be somebody, yes, comes from a lot of sexual abuse. It could be somebody that comes from a lot of physical abuse. You know, it could be somebody who has severe abandonment, who grew up with mental illness, but it's their adaptation for how they are coping with their own childhood. And you're not going to change them, right? So we have to change us.